Ah, let's see. I have to. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, perfect. That's great. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I started recording. I'm gonna press live, and it'll go allegedly over Facebook Live.
Okay.
And maybe it's already there. It actually might already be there. Let's see. Hold on here.
I thought I just got tagged on something that you were
Oh
there.
yeah, you did. Okay.
Okay.
So
So,
okay, it's this is this is just trying it out here. Okay, so it's live streaming now. Here, Renee, double check and see if you can see if that live stream is happening. Jason Danielson, welcome.
thank you, Michael Davenport,
Yeah,
and welcome
I
to you.
yeah, thank you. This is fun. What a great library you have back there.
You like that? Yeah,
I do.
yeah, my library. I love your office.
Thank you. You see Stanley back there?
Yes, I love Stanley. I
Good.
also love the cool, tangy zest of Miracle Whip. So,
Oh, yeah. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. So
yeah.
great shirt. America Needs Teachers. Usually they're red, but this one's blue.
Yeah, well, I have a red America Needs Public Schools, so I have a
Oh,
blue
sure.
America Needs Teachers. Yeah.
Ah, I like it. Are those all from the place in the East Village?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. What is that called? I can't think. What is that store called? Raygun. Yeah, Raygun. Okay, that's right. Now we just got a little jittery here, a little frozen. How's the video for you?
Seems so.
It seems
Yes.
okay. Okay.
Just
Well,
a second. I'm gonna get on a better way.
okay. I'll try mine too. I'm afraid if I change mine, it'll disconnect.
Okay. I should be better now.
Okay. Okay. It seems like I can see it live and hear. Okay. Good. All right. So
I think we're
good. That looks like it's a French library. I see a lot of French.
yeah. I studied French. Never, ever.
Well, have you been to France?
No, I have not
Have you
actually.
really not?
The only place I've been in Europe is Denmark.
Oh, okay.
And the airport in London one time.
Now a big question here: which one, Heathrow or Gatwick?
Gatwick, actually.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Uh, that's like the midway. Heathrow's the O'Hare, and Gatwick is like the midway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, Jason, you've been teaching at Central for how long?
This is my 5th year at Central
Oh,
Academy. Yep.
great. Were you teaching somewhere else before then?
Yeah, I taught for 9 years at Hoover High School,
Oh,
and
terrific.
my first year of teaching was actually 7th grade geography at Brody Middle School.
Oh,
Um,
great.
it's probably better for everyone that I transferred after 1 year. Um,
Seventh graders are a unique animal, aren't they?
yes, they are.
That was the first thing I ever directed was a junior high musical theater,
Oh,
and yeah, so seventh and eighth graders in Shrek. That was fun.
Shrek the music. I've played a
Yeah,
couple of pieces. Yeah, that's
yeah. That's a fun thing. Now, not only do you teach the social studies at Central, but you're also a very accomplished musician. And I've watched some of your live streams from Noche. That's been nice.
oh
Uh,
cool. Yeah.
but I wonder if we had a connection too. You have been in the pit, or you've been a musician with my wife when she's sung and stuff. But were you ever? I wonder if I was ever in a musical that you might have been in the pit at the Playhouse.
I don't know. You would have to go back pretty far.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I've only done a few things at the Playhouse, and that was a long time. Like I was still
I
in
get.
school when I did those.
Oh,
So
okay. I gotcha.
yeah, yeah. The Playhouse schedule is always like. I mean, as you know, it's such
Yeah,
a commitment
big
that
time.
it's hard for me
Commit.
to tie down that many dates and times.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's funny that the Des Moines Playhouse does, when they do those shows, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of a musical, and you've got maybe 15 people in the pit and 30 plus people on stage, and every night they're dedicating to that, except Mondays and Tuesdays. So it's
Yeah.
big commitment. They call it community theater, and people always think of some terrible thing when they think of community
Oh,
theater, but pretty professional there. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, they do a great job. Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been doing stuff at Noche?
Since they opened, really.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, I booked a show there within the first few months of their existence, and it's just ever since it's kind of been
Yeah.
like home away from home, I guess.
Uh,
So
Good. That's good.
it's
Uh,
it's a sanctuary for us jazzers
sure.
anyway. Out
Oh,
of town.
sure.
Yeah.
Have you played with any of their open mic, any of their open mic sort of musical night karaoke things there?
I never have. No.
Good.
I I've been around a couple of
Yeah.
times for at least a little bit of them. But no, I haven't played one.
Good. When you do play, if you got to, let's say somebody said, "Hey, put together a program for Noche. We'll do a 90-minute set." What would you do? If somebody just said, "You free reign. You get 90 minutes." What are you gonna do?
Am I playing solo or do I have a band?
It's up to you. I'll tell you what, Jason. The first 45 minutes is going to be solo, and then the remainder of the time after the break, you can have your favorite guest artist. Who would that be?
Well, yeah, I'd probably want to hire, bass and drums. And I really, really enjoy accompanying actually too.
Mm,
So, maybe a couple of horns, maybe a singer for a few things.
yeah.
We don't want too much singing, as you
No.
know.
Yes.
Uh, but yeah, and I'd play. I mean, I write some music, and sometimes I like what I've written, so I might play a few of those things. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, I love the Great American Songbook. And
Who are your two favorite, let's say, composers or lyricists? Maybe
oh, uh, you know,
that's a hard question.
yeah. Well, from the American Songbook, um, probably Cole Porter.
Oh, sure.
Um, yeah, from the jazz world, I'd say probably Herbie Hancock, actually.
Oh, sure, Herbie. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, talking about the Great American Songbook, uh, when you were in your music training, was there ever like you thought, I really can't wait to learn to play this particular tune or this song? Was there, what are your favorites from the songbook?
oh gosh.
American musical canon.
Well, I mean, like I mentioned, I love Cole Porter's stuff.
Yeah.
Just this week was recording some stuff with Max Wellman at Noche.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we did the tune "So in Love," which I think
Uh-huh.
is just beautiful. Um, and I love like "Begin the Begin" and some of
Oh,
those
sure.
classic things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, those are great tunes. Yeah, and then as far as musicals, I've always this singer Fred Gazzo that I work with all the time.
Oh, he
Um,
cut my hair once.
oh, did he?
Yeah. I think when I was 18, and he had a barber shop that was just across from where that, what is that, big tomato pizza. There was sort of they were I don't know why I'm getting so tongue tied, but it was sort of not abandoned per se, but it was a sort of an older building that was being remodeled, and he had a shop in there, and he cut my hair when I needed it cut.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
But he does a
Yeah,
lot of crooners. Gazzo does.
yeah, yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of that stuff, and that he and I have always been huge fans of My Fair Lady.
Oh, yeah.
We've sort of discovered that we just love that because it's so many great songs in one show. Usually shows have one or two, maybe three things that you remember, but I mean, it's just a whole list of such great songs that stand on their own too. So Lerner and Loewe.
Did you have tickets to see it before it got canceled?
I didn't actually.
Oh,
Sometimes I scrounge them somewhere, but
yeah.
I used to
They
get called for to play those, but not much these
Oh,
days.
well, at the Civic Center at DMPA, I had at school we had a couple different families that donated some tickets, so I gave them to the students, and they were all looking very excited to go see My Fair Lady. I was billing it as the perfect musical, and then the sickness came around, and so they couldn't see it.
Oh,
But
that's too,
anyhow, yeah. I mean, if that's the worst thing that happens during all this, big deal.
yeah,
Yeah. I can make another My Fair Lady connection. That was the only musical, the only performance I ever saw at the Ingersoll Dinner Theater was My Fair Lady.
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow, yeah.
1998, and
Huh.
I took my prom date, and then after we graduated, I never saw her again. Her choice. No,
That's funny.
yeah.
I
So
actually
good.
I played at my prom date's wedding, believe it or
Did you
not.
really? Oh wow, that's fun.
Yeah,
Well, Des Moines, small town.
right.
Yeah, that's great. Well, now I'm so glad you decided to participate in this. This is the first time I'm trying anything like this out, and you can hear my my baby hollering in the other room. What's he doing in the office? No, but I'm glad you said that you liked Inside the Actors Studio because I did too, and I've always really enjoyed that Proust
Mm,
questionnaire. And so let's just why don't I pick one of these questions here, and let's
yeah.
just kind of riff on it. How do you feel about
Okay,
that?
that
Yeah.
sounds great.
And it's funny, one of the instructions that a friend of mine gave me when I said I was going to do this, they said, okay, now Jason Danielson's great, he's a lot smarter than you, so don't get in too deep.
Who said
Well, they'll remain nameless, but so I'm going to try to keep up. But and then the other advice that my friend gave me, they also gave me the same advice on my first day of teaching, and they said, "Don't swear." so,
Oh yeah.
so I'll try,
Yeah,
but
yeah. It's tough for me when I'm not in the classroom or have my kids nearby.
right, it's the environment sort of affects how we
Yeah,
behave. But
I mean, when I'm
so
here in my
rather,
library, you know.
it's a beautiful library, and I also notice you've got quite a bit of wine on the shelf.
Do I? Okay,
Yeah, you're prepared.
that's hilarious because I don't
Yeah.
even drink. Actually, that's
Oh,
really
me either. I don't drink either. So that's but well, let's look here. Let's see. Let's start with something positive. I see, question was, what is your greatest fear? We'll save that one. Yeah. We don't want anyone to hear this that might later take advantage of it. But
yeah.
kind of on a positive thing, what do you consider the question originally is what do you consider is the most overrated virtue? But I wonder, Jason, what do you consider is the most underrated? What's the most underrated virtue?
Oh,
Yeah.
the most underrated virtue. Um, I think as I sit here and touch my face during the,
I'm going to report you. No.
yeah, yeah. I think um, humility. Um, not in a sense of humiliation, but actually true humility, like recognizing what you are good at, what can improve, and in your particularly in our dealings with other people, um, to approach relationships with others with humility, I think is an underrated and unfortunately not an uncommon trait that I see in relationships with others.
Sure. We don't see that humility much on the TV lately.
No, we don't. We
Yeah.
don't. Um,
Right. It's yeah important. It's important to remain humble and compassionate. Now, let's say, how about overrated? What would you say? What is the most overrated virtue then?
you know, this is what my wife and I talk about a lot. And I don't know if it would be considered a virtue or not, but the idea of talent,
Ah,
honestly. It's
especially in the age of YouTube.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But both being, my wife's a musician too, and she's actually a music teacher as well.
Oh,
And we talk a lot about how people who don't people without a lot of experience in the arts who support, and we love that. We love people who, you know, go to shows and exhibits and things, but so often we'll hear people say, "Oh, you're so talented," or "You have such a gift,"
Mm,
or you know, and it's like, well, okay. I mean, yeah, there are certain aptitudes that people have, but we also worked really hard to get to this,
right.
you know.
Right. That's right.
So
There's a discipline that's needed, right? And I think to that point, again, with that sort of YouTube generation, with, you know, the talent, some people think that, hey, my parents, so 3 people told me that I could sing well, and I get a lot of clicks, a lot of views on YouTube. I must be good. Yet there hasn't been that discipline, that time to take and actually learn about the craft or the technique, right? Would you? I imagine you see your head nodding, so you probably agree with that. Yeah.
absolutely, I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, there, you know, some people have an innate talent for something, but again, usually those people that if something just comes easy to them, they don't value it as much as those of us that have had to work hard for something. And I've worked hard, and I still haven't found what my talent is. So, but maybe one day, maybe one day.
Well,
Well, good.
that's not what I've heard about you, Mr. Davenport.
Well, that's kind.
I
That's
hear people
kind.
rave about you in my classes.
Oh, rave or rant, because that brings up a good thing. I have a question that a student texted in, and I didn't have this yesterday when we talked. Um, let's see here. This question is from Mitchell Wallsmith.
Oh no.
Yeah. And Mitchell Wallsmith asks, no joke, why did you want to be a teacher? What a cheesy, terrible question. I agree.
Oh well, you know, yeah. Oh, Mitch. Do you want to take that one first, or do you want me to?
I heard the pay was good. That's why. Yeah, that's no, yeah. You no. This is all about. We'll do a focus on you here. So, why did you want to become a teacher?
Well, you know, for a lot of my life, I didn't.
Mm,
I did not go into college thinking anything about doing education. Um, I well, first I was going to be a jazz piano player, and I went out to the East Coast, and after 1 year, promptly returned and set up shop in Cedar Falls.
mm.
Um, but
Where
um,
was it? Where was it you traveled to?
oh, I was in New Jersey at this school
Oh,
called William
okay.
Patterson University.
Oh, okay, sure.
Which is, yeah, you know, the great jazz program. But when I discovered that I didn't want to be a full-time professional musician in New York, like, which was pretty crazy for my life, because that was all I was going to do all through high school.
Mm,
Um, but
right.
so I transferred back somewhere closer to home, and I went to UNI. Um, and even then, I wasn't sure what I was going to do for a while. And I never really had much interest in history through high school or early in college. And I think a lot of that was because, you know, the way that it was generally taught up into the 90s really was different. Um,
Right.
and it wasn't, you know, it wasn't what historians do, and it wasn't working with history at all. So I wasn't that interested. I loved my English classes in high school, and that, you know, that's a little more getting closer to what historians actually
Sure.
do. Um, so when I took a couple of history classes, as I was just exploring what I was going to even major in, as my parents are getting the bills, um, uh, I discovered that I really love actual history.
Mm,
You know, I love the research, I love the writing, I love the debate over perspectives and, you know, causes and changes and all those things. And then I thought, well, maybe I should teach this, you know?
mm.
And it was kind of right around that time.
About how old are you at
At this
this time?
time or
Yeah.
now? At this time, I was, you know, I was in my early 20s. Yeah.
Okay.
And this was right around the turn of the century. I like to say that now. Uh, and that
2010.
was, yeah, yeah. But it was, you know, this was right around sort of, you know, what I think of as kind of like the Howard Zinn, James Lowen revolution in history education. where things like A People's History and Lies My Teacher Told Me had a really, really powerful impact on, what kids were getting out of this and how history was taught.
Hmm.
Um, and, uh, and I think a really positive, important change. And that sort of, I was I was still young and I was very excited, and I was, my philosophy and my politics and all of this were sort of changing at the time. And so I did come in very idealistic, and, that's eventually why I decided to do it. And I continue doing it now primarily, um, because of the money. No, but because of the relationships with kids,
Right.
and because um, it's not always as um, world changing as I hoped that it could be going into the profession. Um, but I love it. And honestly, I'm terrified of the idea of working with adults all day.
Oh, yeah.
I don't do great with adults in a lot of situations.
Oh, go further with that.
Well, I think a lot of people might question my level of maturity. Um, but I have this mug that I think really, oh, where'd it go?
Oh, it disappeared. You're David Copperfield.
Yeah, yeah. It says world's best farter, I mean father. Um,
Yes, yes.
and that it's probably the most perfect gift that my wife ever got me.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
just, like, there's something about kids that I think is so cool.
Mm.
Um,
They have
they're
an elasticity, don't they? They're an elasticity and an appreciation for the non-conventional.
yes, yes, they see things, less cynically.
Mm.
And even when they do seem jaded, and dark on the world, like Mitch in some ways, puts that image out there. Like, it's different than adults who have, um, not that most adults have given up, but there's just something really unique about that age group.
Right.
Um, and it's really interesting because I did not particularly like those years myself. I never really felt like I fit in very well when I was in high school. But I love working in a high school. I think there's such an energy there, and
Sure.
it gives me hope when I see
Do you,
kids.
when you say that you felt like maybe you didn't fit in very well, I find that kind of to myself, and I used humor as a pretty good coping mechanism that allowed me to mesh with my peers. But what would you say? What were some of the um, what was the dissonance between you in high school and maybe what was going on with other high school students? What kind of made that not enjoyable? Because it's very possible that we have students that also experience that same sort of thing.
Sure. Well, I think for me, um, I mean, part of it was that I have always just been, slightly socially awkward. I make inappropriate jokes at inappropriate times, and I do those sorts of things. Um, I feel like I could be a really good mid-level manager in that office you're sitting in. But uh, but so there's some of that is, just sort of makes it now more comfortable working with teenagers, where
Sure.
I'm old enough that I don't worry so much about them judging me anymore, because I know
Right.
they're going to. But when I was in high school, it was I had different interests.
Hmm.
um, I enjoyed going to some of the sporting events and stuff, particularly when my brother was playing basketball.
Yeah.
But I didn't, I didn't like the parties. I hated the dances. I
Oh,
went to
sure.
most of them because we were supposed to go to them, but like, I never saw the point, I guess. um, and I've never really enjoyed, like, really, and this sounds snobbish and I don't mean it that way, but like, I've never really enjoyed just the kind of meaningless conversation.
Oh,
I want
sure.
to talk about something with substance, and that doesn't mean it has to be intellectual, but
Right.
I don't like to talk about the weather. um I'm not very good. I don't mind it, but I'm not very good at talking about sports. um you know,
I
but like,
find I have to fake my way through almost all those sports conversations, and the references I use are usually because I heard about it in a play or something, So they're 50 years outdated reference to Red Grange or some football player from Death of a Salesman.
nice, nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just different, I guess. Um, and there, there was always this part of me that felt like I kind of wanted to fit in, like that.
Mm,
Oh, it'd be cool if people liked me, and I saw some of that because my brother was just a year behind me, and he was definitely part of like the cool crowd,
hmm.
and he had all these girlfriends, and I never really knew how to ask a girl out, and
Sure.
like he had just like all kinds of friends. There'd be different kids coming over every day, and I had my small circle. Um and I loved them, and I'm still in touch with a number of them. But it was just, I don't know, I saw that difference pretty close to
Hmm.
home.
Sure.
um and there was a part of me that felt like, should I be more like that? But it just wasn't comfortable. So as I
Right.
got older, it was kind of like, I'm just gonna be me, you know
Genuine. Yeah.
yeah,
Authentic. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm a guy who, I love to sit at the piano for, at that time it was like hours at a time.
Ah.
um and I love to watch interesting movies that some of my friends think are weird, and that's where
Yep.
college was. You meet your other weirdos. Um,
That's right. Right. For
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And I love to cook, and these kinds of things that I had to find my people. And there weren't a lot of those people in high school. Um,
It's-
you know,
did you say and you went to Hoover? Is that right? Or no,
yeah,
you first. Oh yeah, you taught at
attitude.
Hoover.
I
Yeah.
went to
Okay.
Hoover as well. Yep.
Yeah. Did you now when I was in high school, I graduated in high school in 1998, and I had
You,
to.
same
You did
age.
as well? Oh
Yeah,
wow. Hey, how about it? But one of us looks 50 and the other one looks 39.
oh, it's,
And I think we know who looks 50.
it's the gray
uh,
hair.
or the lack. No, it's the lack of. But Dennis Hildreth was very inspirational to me with theater, and he would host those contests for speech, IHSSA, and I went to Southeast Polk, but we would go there, and I think you don't get to find all of your people like you do in college, all of your group of people that like the same things, but that the fine arts can help you get kind of close to that with band or choir or theater or even uh, and people get that through athletics, but it's just a little different where it's more of the social emotional with the fine arts, and athletics is certainly physical prowess and competitiveness. So good. Now I want to ask a question about um, teaching, uh, and I understand and I agree with you that the way history, social studies had been taught when we were in school uh, is quite different than it was then. We teach how to think like a historian and look at other perspectives of underrepresented groups, histories that maybe haven't traditionally been represented in the textbooks, that sort of thing. Uh,
Mhm.
that being said, do you have any sort of pet project, like particular eras or subjects that you would just like to only teach this favorite topic all the time? Maybe it's the Russian Revolution, or it's the Civil Rights era. What would be your pet project with history?
Oh man. Well, I have two in particular that I just love. And if Sam Beaumont is watching, he's going to be like, because he brought this up. He made fun of me for this all the time. Um, but my master's was focused on civil rights history,
Uh-huh.
and I love studying the civil rights era. Um, and a particular focus for me is the music of the civil rights era.
Oh, sure.
And that interest was instilled in me back as an undergrad. One of my favorite professors at UNI was John Baskerville, who was also a bass player around town, and I knew him
Oh,
first in the bars and then later in the classroom.
sure.
Uh, and so he sort of showed me how I could combine these two passions, this thing I'd always loved and this new thing that I'm becoming really interested in.
Yeah.
So I love that. And my master's degree was on the civil rights movement in Memphis,
Mm.
and its relationship to Stax Records, which is this company that was
Oh,
producing
sure.
down there. But more generally, music as a form of social activism is a real passion of mine in general. And then the other area that's also related, I guess, to my master's is the constitutional history.
Oh, sure.
Uh, and that was my fellowship through the James Madison Foundation is how I did my master's degree, and I really came to love that whole discussion too. And that can be an area, well, civil rights as well. It can be an area that's really, really frustrating to study. Not just at its time, but
Mm.
going forward in history and where it's gone too. But I just think those two areas are really, really interesting and important
Yes.
as well. So.
And likely to be taught contemporaneously, perhaps in DMPS maybe next year. Is that right? What's not at Central per se, but I know with the contemporary themes as opposed to chronological teaching. I think
That's
that's
right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I've heard some of that. So yeah, you may see. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We have some people that are in the news quite a bit that don't seem to understand John Adams or federalism. I think you would agree, and it's interesting if people studied, in fact, that time to figure out why that was so important to John Adams, and uh, hardly anyone, unfortunately, that is in the political class or the commentary class have even read articles of the Confederation or any of those not founding documents, but the thoughts that went into what our founding documents are. Speak a little more, if you will, on the James Madison. I saw on Facebook that there was a large group of people with some dignitaries, and you were one of them, right? Was it? Tell me about that.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a fabulous program. We've had a few other DMPS teachers who've got it. Most recently was Adam Arthur, who's down at Lincoln. Great guy. I used to work with him on the AP government stuff, actually. And there were one or two prior to me as well. So Des Moines has had some fellows, but yeah, the Madison Foundation awards usually one fellowship for each state, although
Mm.
sometimes they might give a couple in a particular year or whatever. But to a teacher, 6 through 12, um, history, social science teacher who's interested in getting a master's degree in the content area. So they expect you to do your MA in either history or political science or U.S.
Mm.
government or something like that. And there's an emphasis on the Constitution. So we have a specific minimum number of course hours that have to be somehow related to constitutional history. And there's a summer institute that we attend at some point during our fellowship years at Georgetown University. So I spent a month there quite a few summers ago now in 2012, which was just an incredible immersive experience where we have, we do graduate class, which is lectures in the morning, discussions in the afternoon, and then we write a couple of papers. But we also do these field trips. So they've got 50, talk about your people, 50 geeky high school and middle school history and government teachers getting on a charter bus and going to Montpelier and going
Oh,
to
sure.
Mount Vernon and going,
Yeah.
but some of those, the coolest thing we got to do probably was every year they try to arrange for either a Supreme Court justice or someone on the circuit court to talk to the fellows, and they'll do a short, not really a lecture, but they'll do a short talk with us, and then they answer questions. And the year we got
Yeah.
to do was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So
Right.
I met RBG, which was just mind blowing. She is,
She arm wrestled you, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, she's just brilliant. You're probably the most intelligent person I've ever met
Mm.
in person.
Wow.
Just an incredible mind. But but a real kindness too, and cracking jokes with us, and it was very, very appropriately, of course. But
Sure, right. Yeah. It's so interesting, and I'm sure you'll agree. I love the idea that Ginsburg and Scalia, the late Anthony Scalia, were apparently so chummy. And I know that there was even, I think you might recall, there was an opera, perhaps written about the two of them. That's so amazing.
yeah, it really was. She talked about that too,
Mm,
because they were very good friends, and they, with their respective spouses, one of their favorite things was to go attend the opera.
wow.
And yeah, the court in general, and it's got me curious about what those, because that was 2012. I'm
Right.
very curious what those conversations would be like with the fellows now. And unfortunately, they canceled the institute this year, but
Mm,
um, but the court has a long history of sort of being separate from. They're not like the other branches, and they all like purposefully make time to socialize, and to be friends and things like that. Um, but man, the decisions anymore in recent times are so clearly ideologically divided.
right. It's interesting to wonder how they can separate their jurist hat from their personal life, especially in terms of, you think, when you go out with any couple to dinner or something like that, politics almost always informs any sort of conversation, especially if you're talking about current events. I wonder if it wasn't helpful that Scalia and Ginsburg were contemporaries, and of that era, of a similar area, whereas you probably would be unlikely to find Ruth Bader Ginsburg and even Elena Kagan. There is such an age disparity between them, though they might be on the same ideological side. Maybe they wouldn't share in. Although, as I say that, I wasn't Elena Kagan was the Solicitor General, I think,
Yes.
either perhaps under Clinton or it was Obama, because then
Yeah.
she was, yeah, okay. So they had some familiarity with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting thought too. How much of this is more generational too?
Mm,
Um, and you think about politics, and it's interesting because the faces of the way politics have changed are not young.
right.
I mean, if you think of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, for example, as kind of this new
Right.
way of seeing the parties and all of that kind of thing, they're not young, and one of them is not new to politics, um, but
Right.
uh, but in general, I mean, so much of that is generational. Um,
Hmm.
I think about my parents, and they're pretty classical, establishment Kennedy Democrats,
Sure.
and growing up in an era of the Cold War where people were, um, generalizing what ideologies are based
Sure.
on some horrible, horrible government somewhere, and I
Right.
don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah. No, I like that. You think about, you spoke about your parents there. Your mother it was also an educator and an
Yep.
administrator. Was your father involved in education at all?
He used to be.
Okay.
My dad was actually a theater teacher. Yeah,
Oh,
and when,
yeah, and your mom has a connection. She was, and I don't know her, but she was a speech and language teacher as well. Yeah, okay.
yep, she was. And in fact, that's there's a great story. I probably should, but my parents actually met in that way too, way, way
Oh,
back. Mom was dad's student teacher at
oh,
Hoover.
fine.
We have
Yeah.
I'm the third Danielson to work at Hoover, actually.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
yeah, but yeah, and this was back in the 70s. And yeah, he was the theater teacher, and then he taught speech and English. And so that's kind of where she started. And she directed some shows, but she did more speech and English. But yeah, dad left teaching in, I think, about 1981. I was a baby. And went into sales, which his
Uh,
dad had done. And, just
uh,
sort of, I think part of it was economic and part of it was things were changing.
sure.
He was kind of he wasn't a hippie, but they thought he was a hippie the way,
Oh,
because in the teaching establishment. He was pretty
Sure.
out there
Yeah.
comparatively.
Theater teachers. Yeah.
Right, right. He had the Fu
Yeah.
Manchu, and he got in trouble one
Oh,
time because he took a bunch of kids to go see Hair in Chicago, and
oh, there was nudity in that. Yeah.
I know.
Oh, that's great. You know, some talking about changing the way times have changed. Someone told me, a colleague at Roosevelt said at one time you had to teach at Roosevelt, you had to have a PhD or to have any sort of clout in the department. You could teach with just a general bachelor's or master's, but they said you couldn't even eat in the teachers' lounge if you didn't have a PhD. Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Yeah. You make things very difficult. I'd be eating in my car, for sure, for sure.
That's you hardly get any time to eat anymore anyway.
20 minutes, right? Yeah. Mr. Davenport, can I please come to your room during lunch just so sure, I don't want to eat. Now, we've shared many of the same students, and we've mentioned two of them, Sam Beaumont, Mitchell Wallsmith. Um, Talk about humor, how you like to use humor in the classroom, if you will, because that's one of the things that I think most has aligned students, has put us together in conversationally. So we know about humor.
Well, I think most of my students would agree I'm not very good at humor, um, but I'm constantly trying it.
Yeah.
Uh, I like to think that, my teaching style is mostly just like failed stand-up comic. Um,
Ah,
but
yes.
it's funny because like I don't plan I don't plan my jokes
Mm.
usually. I mean, I'll recycle the same ones over and over again if
After first block, and then yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so if kids have had me for 2 or 3 years, they're like, Mr. Danielson, you keep telling that. I know,
Yep.
but I think that's part of just, like I said, I could be Michael Scott if I decided to go into business. It's just, I'm a dork,
Uh-huh.
and when I talk about the idea of going back to our earlier conversation about humility and being genuine, and it's just I just am who I am. um I put a little bit of a filter on it when I'm in the classroom, um but it's just me,
Yeah.
so I try I can't fake it too much. I usually feel like I'm faking it when I'm at PD or something, and
Right.
but like,
Yeah.
so I guess I've never really intentionally thought about like, okay, I'm gonna bring some humor in this particular way, so much as I'm a guy who tells a lot of really horrible dad jokes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for whatever reason some kids relate to it. They don't necessarily like it, but they feel it. um,
Yes.
so I guess, yeah, that particular talent, or lack of talent I should say, is just, it develops organically. It's just, it comes from my being. And
Sure. I I want to touch on something you said there, because it rang true with me. You said a thing about sort of a failed stand-up comedy routine. Uh, that is something. It's interesting. You and I have a similar path in that you had moved to New Jersey and then to be a jazz performer, and then realized maybe that wasn't uh, perfectly going to work. And I did something similar also, where I after a year and a half of college, the actual career path, I quit. I moved to Chicago to be an actor there, and that took a little while. I ended up moving back, and then I became a teacher. But um, there is something there that the performer can still receive the same sort of thrill from an audience that they can get from a student, not just from their laughter or adulation, but from that interaction, from when you are able to transmit learning, content from you to them and inspire that is sort of a just as thrilling as performing. Yeah. It's more one-on-one at times too. Yeah.
yes, yeah, I completely agree. In fact, it's funny, my dad used to talk about that actually,
Mm,
and how, yeah, the classroom, it's kind of like the stage, and it's
yeah.
and Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's something so gratifying about, and it sounds so cliche, like, oh, when they get it, and you see that they get,
Their
but
eyes light up.
yeah, yeah, and I mean that moment is just, it's not a thing,
Right.
plus
Not
that's
in
not
social studies. Oh,
right,
I
right.
get it now. Now
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
But there is something that is really powerful, that, I mean, it sort of gives you this high when you see kids trying something new, or you see them growing, or, I mean, even as ridiculously cheesy as it is, like, I get the biggest smiles sometimes when I'm reading like a DBQ essay or something, and this kid has never really been able to, like, connect the evidence to their argument, and now they're doing it, and it's like, and it sounds so fake when I say this, like, I can't believe I'm saying this. If somebody else did, I'd be like, you're so full of crap. But it's like, it's a genuinely, like, joyful feeling when you see kids grow like that.
Yeah, I
It's
was to say growth. They articulate. Yeah. How amazing isn't it too? Of course, you've been teaching longer than I have, but to have, when you have had a student, maybe, and it might be different at Central per se, but when you've had a student maybe 4 years, you've got to know them through their whole maybe high school career in some capacity. And you just see how much they've changed from that little freshman now to the kid that's going off to Grinnell or DMAC or wherever. That's just really rewarding, that a lot of people don't get in their office jobs.
yeah,
Stanley, for instance.
poor Stanley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, and I know you and I both really care very much for our students. Let me go back to the Proust questionnaire here. Let me try to um, uh, make it artificially connect to talking about education, or not. We don't have to do it that either, but let's see here. Which living person, I was going to say, this is the terrible one. Which living person do you most despise? That doesn't really connect, but we'll use it.
You
And then
really
we'll
want
do
me
the,
to answer?
yeah, well, make sure it's safe, make sure it's safe. Like, you don't want to say Sam Beaumont, Mitchell Wall-Smith, somebody like that. Lexi Hankinson, you don't want to say, yeah.
Oh man, I wouldn't say that anyway, and Mitch thinks I would say it about him, but I wouldn't. I love that kid. Um,
He's great.
yeah.
And would you agree? Somebody could say, my wife could sit in the other room and say, no, you only talked about the same 3 students. What about the others? But there's just so many that we love, and that when they, there are certain ones that really want to be involved and go out of their way to, tell me I'm bald or whatever, and like to tell me you're a terrible teacher, Mr. Davenport. But that that their names come floating to the top when you think of an example. But
Yeah.
I guess, but yeah, we'll go back here. Which living person other than Mitchell do you most despise?
Oh my gosh. All right, I got to be careful here because
Yeah,
this is
right. Yeah. Public
um,
school teacher. Well, how about, I'll change it. Which person, and don't do the cliche thing and say like Hitler or Herod or something like that, Stalin. But how about which person from the last 100 years
oh,
do you most despise?
oh man. Well, yeah, I mean, Hitler and Stalin are good names for that
And
list.
that's the quote we're going to take. Hitler and Stalin are good
Yeah,
names.
I
That's
know.
the quote.
There you go. Now
Out
that's
of
gonna get,
context.
and yes, that's going to be
Mission accomplished.
yeah, HuffPost or something. Um, um, oh man, from the last 100 years.
Well, and let me even adjust this more from despise to which person. This is a big adjustment, big modification. Let's talk about a leader, or someone that had the power to make change. Who do you think in the last 100 years really, and not present day, will really shirked their responsibility or missed out on reading the signs, or something like that? And again, I'm saying we're moving past wherever we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there were so many people I could name. This is harder. Um,
Great blunders in history.
because people usually ask who's your favorite president or something.
Right.
Uh, but there were some really, really, All
It's
right.
hard. I know public school teacher, you got to be
I have to
careful.
be really careful about this though, because I don't want this to come back and bite me. But
Right.
in terms of, okay, let me focus in on stuff that I'm particularly passionate about. So civil rights and
Sure.
race relations and stuff. Um, I think I think in general, I mean, there's the huge disappointments. People like Woodrow Wilson, who are just
Sure. Right.
outright racist and harmful to race relations. But I'm a I'm a really really big fan of Malcolm X.
Uh-huh.
Um, Not necessarily that I agree with him on like every point he ever made, but I love who he was generally and what he stood for and what his life means in terms of the whole narrative.
Sure.
Um, but his warnings about um, the sort of white liberal establishment
Ah.
and the wolf in sheep's clothing, and
Uh-huh.
he referred to the Dixiecrats, and they weren't all Dixiecrats, but like that was pretty pervasive at the time.
Right. For
Um,
sure.
and I think in light of that, um, I think that that whole Kennedy picture of um, you know this whole great hope to me sometimes seems, and this is, I just went in a whole different direction.
I know. I
Because
liked it. It's called a pivot. I liked it.
I don't despise the guy at all. Like some really amazing things and some
Yeah.
tragic. I mean, that tragic short end was so harmful.
Right. Right.
Um, but I think in general, like that whole era, Eisenhower and Kennedy and Johnson and all of that, I wanted to see more.
Yeah.
Um, and that right
Right.
there is the problem of like applying our own lens
Right.
to history, because
Right.
these were people who were trying to work in a system, and we don't always know exactly what the genuine them was,
Right. For
and they had
sure.
to compromise. And but at the same time, I look at those things, and I look at, this isn't the last 100 years, but I look at the creation of the Constitution and
Hmm.
just hunting slavery.
Right.
I mean, that had astronomical implications. Like we're still dealing with the consequences of that.
Sure, sure.
Um,
I like what you've done here because as we're talking about those things that one decision could have made things a lot better, or particularly in terms of in civil rights, thinking about how I idealize FDR a great deal, but that the New Deal, WPA, CCC, those sorts of uh, programs weren't available to the African American community, and Eleanor Roosevelt, despite her hardest, was only able to sort of lead on that much later to get FDR to include those things. So we would like to champion FDR as the savior from the Depression and the World War II, that sort of thing. But he was behind the times on some of that civil rights stuff for sure.
yeah, which is, and again, like, well, it's already out there, so people will say that I'm villainizing, and there are some things that I so love about any of those people. Woodrow Wilson's harder to love, but
Right.
but that's one of the things that I constantly try to emphasize when I'm working with high schoolers in history too, is that there is and it's one of the things that I love the most about kids, and one of the things that I have to push the hardest against is that they're always looking for who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
Right. In those very simplistic terms.
Yeah, and you probably see the same thing in theater.
Oh, sure. Oh yeah. Well, and I can say this year I taught freshman world history also. I had 2 sections of freshman world history this year, and it was my own shortcoming when trying to not overwhelm students with too many complexities. I did find myself when I would explain something, let's say imperialism. It's like, okay, the bad guys and the good, but things are always much more complex than that. But yeah, particularly in theater too, it's hard not to um, oversimplify things, because we know that a young brain that's growing can't take in 10 different streams of information and retain it. So there's simplification. Well, that question got wow. I
Yeah,
started,
I know.
but I liked it. I liked it because that's generic, or that's genuine.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because I think I could sense through the screen that you and I probably would both name the same person right away in a different
Uh,
context, but we
yeah,
gotta be careful, you
for
know.
sure, for sure. Well, and to last two spring breaks ago, my wife and um, we have a little hobby. We've been trying to go to all of the presidential libraries, the official ones that are around, and we've done Nixon, Eisenhower, Truman. Or am I missing any? Oh, well, in Johnson, that's where I'm going. We went to and Hoover, but we went to Lyndon Johnson's, and that's just such an amazing thing to read through the correspondence that he was receiving, telegrams, getting from the people with any decision he would make, and talk about complexity there. And you think, gosh, if Johnson just would have done this, or you even go back to Kennedy, and you think, well, if you just wouldn't have sent those advisors into Indochina, all those political missteps. But yes, I imagine we would come up with many of the same people. Let me cheat here and go back to the questionnaire here. Do you have 10 more minutes?
I yes, absolutely.
Do you have
This is
3 more hours? No. Let's see. We could do this again here now.
you're
Uh,
really good at this, actually. I gotta say, like, you should just do a series. You
hey,
even have you have a bit of the James Lipton beard, even. It's nice.
I'll slick the hair back. Yeah. But I could do that. Sadly, and James Lipton, as you know, he died this year. He died a couple months ago. In fact, let's see here. Okay, so now, other than teaching and music, what would be one other occupation that you might enjoy?
Well, I mean, the easy answer there would be it's related to what I do anyway, is to actually like go into the field of history and do
Mm-hmm.
research and writing and try to
Yeah.
publish, and in a different world. And when my kids get older, I hope to do more of that anyway. um but it's hard to do that with a full-time teaching job,
Right.
um I mean, something unrelated, something else. Man, uh I love all things culinary.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and that sounds like, I mean, it sounds like the most horrible, awful job, and also the most awesome thing you could possibly do is to like run a restaurant or work in a kitchen, you know?
Right. Right.
I have a former student actually who's really passionate early on in my days at Hoover, who is a chef now, and that's she sort of knew that from her early days, that's what she was going to do, and the pictures on Facebook and stuff, it's amazing. And I'm a home cook, and I experiment, and I like to mess around, and I'm a pretty good home cook, but like I'm fascinated by the whole world of like the combination of like the chemistry and
Mm-hmm.
art, and
Gastronomy is
yes,
yeah.
the guest, yeah,
Yeah.
all of that goes into like presenting food in that way. That would be
Yeah.
something really fun, I think. But then again, I mean, like one of the coolest people I think that ever lived in recent times was Anthony Bourdain, and
Oh, yes.
like that's not an easy gig, man.
No, for sure not. Yeah, talk about what and a polymath into his own. He wasn't merely a foodie, but complex. And I loved those world travels. He
Mhm.
would go on, and when you think of a rock star, you don't think of a chef or somebody, but he certainly was a rock star, and someone that was empathetic and felt so much. Um, it's interesting as you started to bring up talking about food. Would you and your wife consider yourselves foodies?
No, she
No.
definitely would not.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
she rolls her eyes a lot. And sometimes she pours a bowl of cereal later that evening too.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I don't know that I'm a foodie in the sense of like, some of my friends are real foodies.
Hmm.
Um, but I do love it. I love going to restaurants and doing the research ahead of time and figuring out
Yeah.
like what's the signature here. I love it when the server is willing to talk about what's going on. And, I'm fascinated by all of that. Um,
That's
so
cool.
I,
Uh, I wish you're brave. I like restaurants, and as a almost 300-pound guy, I like food. Uh, but I don't like to do the risk of trying something for fear that I won't like it. I'm not brave in that way because I want to enjoy the meal, and I'm one of those people that I want to be filled up, as opposed to have a pleasure on the palate sort of a thing. But I think it's great that you do that and you do the research during this lockdown, or I guess we're not even in a lockdown in Iowa during this polite self-management area. Have you visited any of our local non-franchise places for any takeout? Have you done any of that?
yes. I've done a lot of cooking too, which has been really
Yeah.
fun.
Oh, good.
But no, we try to at least about once a week. Pick up from somewhere nearby.
Yeah.
Um, and Yeah, I've made several stops at the Ritual Cafe, which is just
Uh-huh.
my love them so much.
Yes.
I just love everything about them.
Good.
um, and they've also been really good to me professionally too, because I've brought kids over there for an activity we do during the Enlightenment and AP Euro history
Oh,
and stuff.
fine. Yeah.
Um, so so yeah, I've really tried to support them.
Good.
Yeah, other stuff. Let's see, what have we done? Um, we did Tumia and Sons for my
Great.
birthday.
Oh, great. Yeah. Love that Italian. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
I like
Um,
it. I like to go in there. I years ago, I was doing this weird thing where I was getting to know all the local priests in town. If they were over the age of 60, I wanted to know them and get to know about Des Moines and the diocese and things like that. And I went to me and Sons with one of the priests from the cathedral, Father John Bertogli, and walking into me and Sons on the south side at 7 o'clock at night on a Saturday after after mass lets out. It was like walking to the place with Frank Sinatra. And the guy didn't order off the menu. He had special stuff, they're bringing plates of this and that. To me, as and son, love it. They're fantastic. Very
yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah, cool.
If you were going to recommend a place, maybe for me or anybody listening to try that you haven't spoken of, what would be a restaurant you'd recommend?
This is tough. Okay.
Yeah. You can give one or two, sure.
Okay. Um, my mind is just off. Okay. Um,
In radio business, we call this a dead air. So I'm going to
oh
talk until
my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Um,
if I said American cuisine, traditional American gastronomy, not pub food, but steaks and burgers and that sort of thing.
okay. Well, see, now I'm going to plug some of our shared alums here too.
Sure.
I do love Americana.
Yes,
Western game.
that's great.
Um,
Carlson's.
Scott Carlson. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good people.
fantastic.
Um, yeah, they're great.
Lee just returned from Spain. Lee Carlson had been there, and so.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. In fact, she was on one of my trips to Denmark. So,
Oh, great.
yeah, yeah. Great kid. Um, but yeah, and when I'm going out anymore too, I love to try to get kinds of cuisine, like more global,
Mm.
that I'm just not very good at home. So obviously, like Adong is
Oh,
always
sure.
always a big one.
Great. Love
um,
the pho. Love the pho.
yes, yes, yes. I don't know if they're the king of pho or if there's someone else, but
Yeah.
someone out there is the yeah. Um,
Thai
but
flavor is very good also. Thai
Thai
flavors.
flavors is great. And then the other one that I love for pho and for banh mi is over on Second Avenue, Pho 888. Um,
Yeah, sure.
it-
Yes, I live nearby. Yeah.
Oh yeah, cool.
Banh mi. Now that's the sandwich, right? That's
That's the
I
sandwich.
with
Yeah.
it's the fermented vegetable on there, and yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But then, like, it's usually on this really great, like, French bread, which is so
Yeah.
fun. That's
Right.
why, yeah, that's what I love about food too, is the history and the geography
Oh,
that's involved in food is
French
really,
influence
yeah. I
in
would love to do
Indonesia.
one. I would love for 1 year to just teach AP Human Geography using, like, old Anthony Bourdain shows. Um,
You probably could say for copyright, just don't tell anybody.
right, right. So, that stuff is great. I love India Star over on
Oh,
Douglas. Like,
sure,
that was
yeah.
my, they came around when I was going to either Meredith or Hoover, I think is when
Hmm.
they showed up, and that's my old neighborhood. And so, they're great too. Um, yeah, any of the Wasabi family is great because I'm not going to be making
Oh,
sushi,
sure,
so,
right.
uh,
You could try, risky. You could try. What was that
yeah.
Simpsons episode from when we would have been in school? It was the episode. I don't know if you watched The Simpsons, but the blowfish. Remember
Yes,
that?
and
Yeah,
it was, yeah, it's poison. You have to be cut just yes.
that's right.
Right.
Uh-huh. I figured that reference you might. Good. Yeah, no, that. I'll give you one final Proust question here, and we'll sort of wrap up where we are. How would you like to die?
Yeah, I was looking at that question on the list, and my first thought, because I've been watching the Clone Wars so much with my son
Oh,
Max lately, is
yeah,
a lightsaber battle, preferably
sure.
like a really epic one. But if I don't have that choice, you know, I don't know. I think I think I mean, hopefully it's not for a long time. I would
Right.
like to live, to my older years. Um, I would like to have time that I'm retired. As much as I do, I love teaching. We're really lucky to have a job like this. Um, but I also want to have some years eventually where I do my thing too. I
Mm-hmm.
love nature and camping and stuff like that, and I want to do some more traveling. Um, but so I'd like to be older, and I think probably I prefer to be asleep.
Yeah,
Um,
right. It's
I,
painless. Yeah.
the idea of, like, being conscious and then all of a sudden, like, I don't know, it's kind of terrifying. But I would hope that it would be peaceful one way or
Right.
another. But it is
That
what
would be
it is.
nice. Was it? Was it? I could be misquoting. Was it Robert California from The Office, or someone said in that vein? I would like to be torn apart by wild wolves. I think was that Robert California.
That was
Maybe.
Marco.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Love that
Yeah.
cartoon.
I couldn't have thought of that just sitting over in the chair, but since you jogged my memory, it made me think of that. And then finally, and this has been so fun. We'll have to do this again. We'll have to do a part two.
Yeah,
Um,
this.
what do you think? What would you say your I don't want to say your mission statement for yourself is? That no, it's cheesy. But what would you say, Jason Danielson, your motto for yourself is? What's sort of your operating manual?
you know, um, I thought about this one too, and it's another one that I might have to dance around it a little bit, but as far as an explanation, but um, probably the most important thing for me, as I think about my own life, um, is what's usually referred to as the serenity prayer.
Ah,
Um,
mhm.
grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Um,
Yes.
and if I can be centered in the kind of those three things, and that's that approach is, I mean, they've used it in various things through education and whatever else. Like, what can I control? What can't I control? How do I deal with the things that I can't control? What's the right way to, like, it's a good way to find balance, I guess.
Hmm.
So That's what I try to go by each day, I guess.
I like it. I like it. The Serenity Prayer is very good and universal. It's been universally applied to a lot of different other things. And just in closing, I'll say that that sort of reminds me one of my predecessors at Roosevelt, Lori Glaive. Many of her students and the ones that will graduate this year know her for a particular phrase or a quote where she would say, "Just remember always to give back more than you could ever possibly take." And that sort of is a kind of a nice little nutshell from Chestnut from maybe the Serenity Prayer of a kind. But well, Jason, thanks for putting up all my.
Before we're done, what's
Yeah.
your motto? I want to know your motto
Oh
too.
gosh. Um, uh, I'll tell you what my motto is, and it comes from when I was in high school. Uh, I was I was elected to become student council president my senior year, or junior year into the senior year, and we had a little debate in front of the whole school in the gymnasium, and at one point I had a candidate on my left and a candidate on my right, and it wasn't really a moderated debate. So these two students, other classmates, were peppering me with questions, and I just would start to answer one thing, and then the next one would come. I remember in my mind, I kept thinking, "Just get through, just make it through the day. You'll be fine." So that's my motto for right now: is just make it through the day.
That's pretty good right now, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and when in teaching in the classroom, it's usually just make it through the day, teach something, and try not to swear. So
Those are
yeah,
good
good,
things.
good. Well, we'll definitely do this sooner rather than later. And Jason Danielson, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Michael Davenport. This was great fun.
All
Thanks.
right.
Take care.
Well, take care. Bye bye.